Smears of ash and lost life drifted through the war-torn streets of Axum. Hazy phantoms of rampant death drifting on the dying heat of molten metal and cooling corpses. Beneath them labored the still-living phantoms of the Republic, each bearing the face of a man now years dead, covered by the pale scowl of alien design. And beholding it all were blue eyes, searching the smoky ghosts of battle, seeking the sign of her counterpart's approach. Yet, time and time again, against the sullied silver walls and shattered blue glass of the smoldering spires, the only forms Ahsoka's eyes could find were those of the dead and the silent. Those who could not be helped, nor lend help any longer. Those of the lost. The glimpse of so many drove spikes into her, but they were not unfamiliar spikes. The Confederacy had massacred civilian populations, had corralled desperate separatists into suicidal charges for the sake of an advantage in battle. Grievous was no less a warlord than any of these Imperials. And yet, there had just been a magnitude to all of this that put what had come before to shame. This one battle felt like an entire week-long siege, and the sheer number of corpses was a slowly festering testament to that. The clones, to their credit, had made a token attempt to recover the dead beforehand so as to not taint the meeting ground overmuch, but the task was one which would require a distinctly dedicated effort, and that kind of effort would need to wait. All the while, Ahsoka watched on, arms crossed as the rest of the Republic delegation reached the meeting point. The young, former Jedi could not help but instinctively extend her senses to the Force, feeling the anxiety within the approaching prisoners they were herding, as well as the tension and barely constrained anger boiling inside of the clones who guarded over them. Even the approach of the Imperial delegation was noticed, brushing against her frayed senses. They were close, but not yet in sight. Ahsoka, feeling that one of their own was extending their senses back in her direction, doing much the same as she was. There was something mildly familiar in the presence, but she dared not entangle herself too closely with it, knowing well how dangerous Imperial Force wielders were from the reports the clones had delivered. Besides, every second counted, and Ahsoka intended to use the time wisely, moving her mind's projection past the extending arm of the other presence and back toward the rest of the delegation, trying to feel if they... She winced and recoiled as something cold and violent slapped against her mind, like a strict teacher's ruler slapping over the exposed hand of a disobedient pupil. It was like being slapped with a solid, frozen bar of steel, and on top of that, one that was screaming, "Through me!" She managed to make out as she recovered, pulling her presence back from whatever defense they had around them. Clearly, they were quite interested in maintaining their subtle privacy, and Ahsoka, rubbing her head, huffed in frustration. Turning her thoughts back to what she might do, she looked around for the former captain, but now Commander Rex, raising her arm to signal him before staggering again, suddenly sensing something which swept over her preternatural senses like an ice-cold explosion. Her bones quaked inside her, flesh shuddering to follow, her breath exhaling, yet finding her voice caught in her throat. She could hear the clash of mighty waves careening against the fervor of erupting mountains, distant but keening cacophony within the force that struck a sense within her, fear and alarm buzzing like wasps kicked from a nest. Something was happening, a collision of forces, or the revelation of a new force, something so sharp and rising that it ate all of Tano's attention until the moment that it was pulled back by something else.
Commander?
Rex asked, noticing how she had frozen up, able to see that something had affected the former Padawan and tensing himself in response, looking around as he drew his pistols. Ahsoka shook her head, Leku flailing across her shoulders lightly. She tried to focus on what this was, but despite how incredibly intense it felt, it only made it clearer that it was many, many miles away, far within the reaches of a different section of the city. To address it, whatever it was, would mean attention and resources she could not spare, not right now. She set her jaw and drew in a deep breath.
It's nothing, Rex, nothing,
she said quickly, looking off into the distant direction of the power she felt. Turning back, she blushed lightly when Rex's body language instantly conveyed his evident disbelief.
Ahsoka,
Rex began to say, the young woman waving him off before he could continue.
Not nothing, Rex, but nothing to do with us right now. It might actually be a very big something, but it's not something nearby, so please, put the prisoners over there, up against the wall.
She directed, pointing to her left.
And make sure Nerva Sharp, the droid woman in the back tank, is near the front.
Commander Rex said nothing, eyeing her through his helmet before shallowly bowing his head in acknowledgement and turning to relay the orders to the other clones. The Imperial POWs were moved into position without resistance, their hands on their heads as they marched in a line, their eyes hollow and devoid of hope. Seeking some insight, and to reorient herself on the mission at hand, Ahsoka probed their emotions with the Force, moving more deeply than she had before, and, within them, felt something that sent a cold shock running through her. Only despair. The Togrutan teenager was once again made to grow beyond her years, as she faced the realization that these men and women had resigned themselves entirely to death and fully expected far worse. They had no expectation that whatever was about to happen might result in their actual release. They had no hope save for that of escape or liberation, violent liberation. They were grim, locked. Within them existed no conception of victory through anything less than war, total war, only war. She clenched her fists, fighting back the surge of hot frustration which bloomed in her chest. The heat of her sudden anger attempted to counteract the ice which was seeping up from the veins in her feet, born of germinating horror and shock, as well as more than a little disappointment. They acted like they came from a galaxy without any regard for POWs at all. That thought immediately had Ahsoka internally recoiling, but from her own hypocrisy. As she remembered General Grievous's treatment of prisoners of war, especially Jedi. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow, especially here and now.
Maybe we aren't so far behind them after all.
She muttered to herself as a team of clones moved past her and hurriedly began to set up a large meeting table, placing and anchoring it down to the ground before retrieving 4 repulsor field generators. Each generator was a tall leg with a projector at the top, easily high enough to be over the head of the tallest natural human. Once set and activated, the 4 tall repulsor generators projected a protective blue canopy over their heads, and though it was not powerful enough to do more than slow down anything like a falling body, Ahsoka still figured it would be of use when she considered the distant thunder rumbling ominously, coming closer and closer. After all, she did not predict that any of them would be keen on negotiating in the rain. The young warrior turned her head then, spotting Obi-Wan speaking with a couple of clones not too distant from her. Rubbing her chin and turning her head back towards the source of that disturbance in the Force, she angled towards her former master's former master and began to walk towards him, waving as she came in close. Seeing her approach, he wrapped up what he was saying and dismissed the clones with a nod of his head, the men saluting and running off at a hasty trot. The Jedi Master now turning to face Ahsoka.
Did you feel that?
she asked in a whisper, bright blue eyes alighting with the distant lightning. Obi-Wan nodded his head, stroking his beard ponderously with one bandaged hand.
I did. I've already sent orders addressing it.
He answered, eyes shimmering lightly with the far-off flashes born in the storm.
Addressing what? Do you know what it is?
Ahsoka asked back more urgently.
I don't know yet. However, I have my suspicions. And the direction I am sensing this from. It is the same general direction that Master Windu and I sent Ayla in order to help gather up the other Jedi. I don't know if she's involved or not, but...
He began to explain.
But it's better to be safe.
The former Jedi interjected with a nod, seeing Obi-Wan nod back before continuing.
Good. Then we can focus on just this meeting until it's over.
The ex-Padawan said with a sigh, shaking her head lightly. Obi-Wan nodded, his eyes sliding from the distance to her, his forehead creasing somewhat.
Ahsoka,
he began to say, picking his words carefully.
This may not work the way you think it will.
The Master continued before she interjected again.
Trust in the Force,
she said quickly, walking away as she did and heading towards the meeting table. She tried to project confidence, maybe even overconfidence, but as Obi-Wan's keen eyes followed her, Ahsoka knew just how hollow her words would sound. Yet, even in the face of that, she firmed her lips and her resolve. There was a chance here, hope, even if only a glimmer of it. She would not fail it by doing anything less than the most that she could do, give the most that she could give. Ahsoka's eyes narrowed, her teeth gritting tightly behind her pursed lips. She drove off the tension she felt encroaching on her with a deep, steadying breath. Then she turned herself to the intrusive thoughts of the Greater Republic, of Anakin, and Master Windu, the storm, and the strange sense. She drove them all away with her next breath, focusing entirely on the diplomatic battle that was now presented before her. She knew that if she failed, no one would die, not right away, but if she could win, then there was a chance no one else would have to die at all. Ahsoka may not have been a Jedi any longer, but she knew no other way of life. She was a soldier, a warrior, but more than that, she was a peacekeeper, a warrior who warred for harmony. All previous battles had been fights to stave off defeat or to inch towards a tactical win. But now the battle which was about to be waged could win her victory, not tactical, practical, or temporary victory, but what she would consider to be true victory. At the touch of those thoughts, Ahsoka cringed, feeling a twinge of pain in her head as she remembered the priest and his martyred men, as she remembered the look on his face when she begged him to surrender. She remembered Farnes's declaration, his fear, which had rapidly soured into hatred. And she remembered the bombardment of feeling and sensation she had been assaulted with during her time in orbit, the sound of billions upon billions of voices crying out in sudden terror, and then being silenced all at once.
True victory,
she muttered to herself.
Even if only on this one planet.
The former Jedi finished, a dark voice reminding the rest of the light which composed her that this war was far from over.
CGG-1, this is CGG-4, clearance code star 5 beta beta, over.
Larkin said through his headpiece. There was a pause, static crackling over his thick headset.
Copy CGG-4. Confirmation acquired and accepted. Please proceed. Over.
Responded the operator on the other Golan defense platform.
We've detected another small group of spatial anomalies approaching from Sector T.
Larkin said, his voice straight, professional, hardly bored.
We are requesting a follow-up scan and pinpoint from your platform. Can you comply? Over.
Larkin continued, hands moving across the keys of his station, large screen before him indicating that the records of their own scan of Sector T was being forwarded to them. Another pause then, but not as long.
Copy that, CGG-4. Stand by for our secondary scan, over.
The other operator responded.
Copy. Standing by. Over.
Larkin sent before deactivating the mic on his headset and leaning back in his chair, sighing heavily.
Double shifting it, eh, Lark?
Quipped Denora, smiling down at him in his control alcove as she walked across what passed for a command bridge on their defensive station. Larkin scoffed and reached up, taking the hot foam cup of fresh calf she kneeled down to hand to him. She smiled brightly down at him, and he felt a warm flush on his face. The job didn't have many perks, but he couldn't complain about getting to be around a charming blue tailhead.
More like quadruple shifting,
he said as he brought the cup down to his mouth, popping open the top and blowing over the surface of the hot, chocolate-colored calf.
Stray rocks from that massive fleet jump keep wandering into the mid-rings and solar system, and we've got way too much stuff floating around to just let them go untagged or undusted.
Larkin continued to vent before taking a slow sip of his drink. Denora handed another foam cup to Jekar, the Duros man sitting 2 seats down from Larkin within the same alcove.
Is it non-dilithiate?
Jekar asked as he lowered his headset and reached up.
And with extra wabasap.
Denora replied, nodding as she did.
You're a treasure.
The Duros buzzed, taking the calf and prying open the top eagerly.
So what's with all the extra work?
The blue Twi'lek asked of no one in particular as she stood again and began to walk over to the next sunken alcove.
It's not because of all of us, is it?
She asked a moment later, and though she was out of sight, Larkin had no trouble at all imagining the distressed expression on her hairless blue features.
No!
He set out from his alcove.
It's got nothing to do with the refugees.
Another man, Sorsko, said from the next alcove over. Larkin could only hear Denora's sigh of relief and chose to go on.
It's that massive departure. Nearly the entire Republic fleet leaving all at once caused some major disturbances in mid- and outer system debris.
He explained.
Asteroids, meteors, old wrecks that were in previously stable orbits. A lot of it has drifted out of alignment. It's our job to keep not just Coruscant safe with our guns and armor, but also to keep as much of the system's infrastructure safe as well, using our deep-range scanners. Anything that might swing in and one day hit something has to be tracked, logged, and intercepted before it has a chance to.
Above him and out of sight, Denora stood from another delivery, folding the tray she had been using against her uniform and nodding her head.
Oh, so all the extra work is coming from all the junk the leaving fleets left behind.
She surmised.
Close enough.
Jekar hummed.
What do you mean?
Denora asked, prompting a heavy sigh from the man.
Well, it's not just supposed to be us. I'm looking at a whole shower of SA-9s falling into a trajectory with the capital itself, and from the sound of it, we were the first ones to call it in.
He grunted, indicating towards his screen for the benefit of no one in particular.
Why is that bad? What's an SA-9?
Denora followed up nervously.
Spatial anomalies of Category 9, unknown inert objects.
Another crewmate provided.
And it's bad because...
Larkin began to explain.
CGG-2 should have caught this an hour before us at least, to say nothing of one of the other out platforms. And these stick out like sore thumbs, aside from the fact that they'd be dangerously close to colliding with Coruscant in 6 or so months.
He went on, his voice lined with exasperation.
Irregular shapes, high-density cores, extrasolar trajectories...
The technical officer said, listing off what he could notice from the scans his own station had already taken and processed. He trailed off, the air going still and silent as he, as well as all of those who were listening, grew more and more alarmed with the descriptions.
Larkin, have you run that by a secondary scam yet?
Prayersons asked from her alcove, voice audible through the air but repeating from a speaker built into the side of his station. He sat up straight, sliding his calf into a holder as he leaned forward into his station, pressing the comm response key.
Yes, copy that. It was the first thing I did, and I'm still waiting for CGG-1 to get back to me with it.
He reported, eyes scanning his monitor as he narrowed the sensors down on the swarm of objects.
How long ago was that?
Jekar asked, leaning out from his own nearby station to voice the words more subtly to Larkin. For his part, Larkin did not answer, instead sliding his headset back up and activating a link between the two Golan defense platforms once more.
CGG-1, this is CGG-4, clearance code star 5 beta beta, over.
He said again. There was static, a faint buzzing, followed by nothing more. And with every growing moment, a pit was opening in Larkin's stomach.
CGG-1, this is CGG-4, attempting to re-establish communication, over.
He sent, leaning forward even more, as if his proximity to the screen would enable him to hear something, anything. Everyone seemed to stop and listen, until, after several seconds of silence, a voice broke it.
Larkin,
Prayersons radioed from her alcove.
confirm whether or not we have an incoming or outgoing comm lapse.
She said calmly through the speaker.
Copy that.
He responded quickly, flipping a few switches before pressing down on the comm button again.
Low control, this is CGG-4, clearance code star 5 beta beta, over.
He sent.
Copy that, CGG-4. This is low control. How can we help you? Over.
Was the prompt response, sending streaks of ice through Larkin's veins.
Prayerson, outgoing comm lapse confirmed on CGG-1.
He quickly reported.
Right.
Prayerson said, her voice clipped and professional.
Activate yellow alert and call the overseer to the bridge.